Good evening. Happy Wednesday, the day of camels and humps Wednesdays. Thank you for coming out tonight. Glad to see you all here. My talk today is about React 16, all the things that are new, fun, and cool. Before I start, I'm curious, we had the presentation before, the questions, who is currently using React? Okay, who is currently using React 15? Okay, who's currently using React 16? All right, okay, so some things you might already be aware of, some things you will learn new, and some things you'll forget, because that's how memory works. Okay, enough of that. So that is a picture of me. My name is Harry Wolff. That looks like me because it's a picture of me. That's how it goes. That's photography. This isn't a talk on photography. I currently work at MongoDB as a lead web engineer on the cloud services team. A question I'm asked sometimes is, what does Mongo do with the front end? And that is a lot. We have a very full-featured web application that lets you completely administrate and control your MongoDB instances. So that is a very rich application built with originally in Backbone and now being migrated over to React, hence why I am here. You can find me on the internet after this talk if you want to. If you don't, forget this slide, but my name is consistent because I am unoriginal, but it's HS Wolff. The S is for S. That's my middle name. Before I go on, I want to have one thing I'm going to plug, with a lot of plugs. I spent too much time on the slides so that I reuse it all the time because it plugs. Because who does not? Sorry? That's true. I think I have a good representation around the world, right, of different plugs. Yeah, good eye. You are plugged in. So I recently started doing this weekly YouTube show about JavaScript, Frontend Web. It's every Monday, 7 a.m. I make a new video, and in the video I talk about all the things that happened the past week about the Frontend Web ecosystem. So you can see some things that I've talked about in the past. Again, if you forget what I look like, you can go on there. You'll see me talking to you for about 10 minutes. I've talked about the Mozilla Developer Network website. I talked about Vue because all frameworks are awesome, right? Right. Thank you. Talked about CSS Grid, very exciting. React, obviously. Editors, VS Code, Sublime Text, Atom, Visual Studio, IntelliJ, yeah. And also Node, of course. Cool. So, with that being said, let's get into the meat of this talk and say React 16, what's the big deal? So React 16 came out, gosh, was it like November, December? When was it now? When was it? September. September. Oh, even more in the back. Oh, look at that. It's almost another year again. So the first thing, so in this talk, I'm going to tell you about the new features, the marquee features that when you actually do upgrade to React 16, you can actually take advantage of. But one of the biggest new features of React 16 that I think is the single biggest feature is that if you currently have no deprecations in your code base, you can upgrade to React 16 without any issue. You can literally change the package number from React 15 to React 16, and you have upgraded to React 16. Thank you. I'll talk to you. Okay, another cool thing about React 16, a big thing that you've probably heard about in the ecosystem before, is this thing called fiber. It's a lot of words, it's a buzz, it's also good for your health. Gotta eat fiber. Thank you so much for laughing. I really honestly appreciate it. So the big deal with fiber and why it's so cool is that when you have your React code and you write your React components, you give it to React, and then it has this thing called a reconciliation engine, where it looks at your React code, it reconciles it, and then updates the web browser with that new code. And this reconciliation engine is what was completely rewritten in React 16, and that's what they called fiber. So their old reconciliation engine is called the stack reconciliation engine, and this new one is called fiber. And the most amazing thing about this, in my opinion, is that it is completely backwards compatible with your existing React components. And that is just, I'm flummoxed by that. That is just amazing. The other awesome thing about that is that it actually opens up many future enhancements that the React team is going to explore in the future. And one of those things that you might have heard about before as well is this thing called async rendering. Now, I can talk a lot about what that means, async rendering, but I think the easiest way to explain it is via a demonstration. So one person on the React core team made this demo. Here you can see this web page. You see this spinning square in the top right. And when you reload and re-render the page, if you look at the square spinning, you'll see that it pauses. And the reason for that is because this is using the same behavior of React 16 and below, using like the stack way of rendering. When you actually are rendering a web page, you have 16 milliseconds. Also, the talk about performance is definitely appropriate to this as well, so thank you for that lead up. You have 16 milliseconds of time before you start seeing the browser lag. So what you're seeing here is an introduction of artificial lag to show that the square is paused. And the problem that up until React 16, before Fiber, is that React had no way of saying, hey, I'm exceeding my budget, let me actually like suspend my control and give it back to the browser. And that is the big deal with React 16 going forward and Fiber, is that when you actually enable async rendering, which I'll do here now, that square does not pause. So this huge project was to make sure a square could spin in circles. But I mean, that's a simplification, obviously, but what it actually allows the React framework to do is actually to have complete control over its entire process of reconciliation, such that it can pause, say, hey, I've taken up too much time, let's let the browser do some things. Then when the browser's done, it gives it back to JavaScript and it keeps on going its way. Fiber also has the ability to go backwards, and it has all this a lot of unlocked potential that will be investigated going forward. They're investigating it now with some experimental APIs. It'll be good fodder for future talks, so I'll come back. But that is pretty much async rendering, which is very, very exciting. The next other cool new feature about React 16 is the server-side rendering has actually been completely rewritten. I personally don't use React that much on the server, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into that, but one of the cool new features that it has is support for streaming. So if you do render React on the server, you now have a more efficient way of delivering that up to the client. It's like a cord underneath my foot. All right, cool. So now I want to code and actually show you some of the more fun features as an application developer that you're going to take advantage of when you actually upgrade to React 16. Live coding is always enjoyable. Okay, so what I've made is a example application here, which is like a simple like newsfeed type application. I'm sure it's too small, so let's enhance. That was the wrong enhance. 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 Is that enhanced? Great. I can see it. I just want to make sure you can see it. So this is a very simple application that I made to just show all the new features of React 16. You can load new data here. This just looks so wild. Load new data. Cool. And here's the source code on the side. And the first thing I want to show that I mentioned initially about the cool new thing about React 16, I'm using actually like direct CDN URLs for this, just so I can show an easy upgrade, not have to worry about npm install, because that's always very fast. So I'm going to actually uncomment these React 15 lines, go to React 16. This one is, hey there, buddy. Well, just don't want to uncomment it. Oh, there it is. Cool. Save it, refresh, and we are now rocking on React 16. Demo done. No. All right, so let's actually go back. So I actually want to show you something that's interesting. So we have here React 15, and let's actually explore the UI here a little bit. We have here a simple like news item. Excuse me, just smacking this microphone. I'm very angry at it, obviously. Okay. And you can see in here we have this section row with a header. And we have a lot of these noisy comments that up until React 16 you actually needed, because that's how React kept track of where things were in the DOM. So when you had your React component and it had to reconcile it used these comments to know where to go, where to find those things to put them in there. We also have this italic I element with a span inside of it. And then if I actually go back to, golly. My shortcuts are feeling me now. If I go back to React 16 and I refresh, What's pretty cool about that is that the output in the DOM is now worlds cleaner. World class. This is a random word generator, so I did not plan on that. So if you remember before, we had all that comments, and now with React 16, that is gone. React is now smart enough with Fiber to know exactly where those things are in the DOM hierarchy. Again, let me actually go back. I don't want this. I want this again. Cool. So now let's jump into React 15. Wonderful. So here's my application. It's pretty plain. We have an app, which is being rendered by React DOM.render. We have a containing div. We have an h1. We have a page. Let's go up here. Cool. We have a page. It's doing things. Cool. If it doesn't have data, it shows the loading stuff, right? We saw that before. Wonderful. We have this data cell. Let's hop up to the data cell. I promise you there's a point to this. Data cell section. And we have this pretty date thing. And this is what I want to talk about. We have in here the DOM, the I element with a span inside. And this pretty date is just a simple wrapper around Moment.js, which I'm sure you have used in the past before. And I'm using Moment.js as a way to get that nice from now text that you see there from 7 months ago. And up until React 16, there are only two types of things that you could return from a React component's render function. You could either return a React element or another component, or null. That was it. There's two things. With React 16, you now have two additional things to be able to render from. The first one, which is very cool, is a string. So you can actually use this as like a simple string. Remove this. Remove this. Hit save. And oh, pain. Why is there pain? You're paying attention. That was a trick. Thank you. Yes, you are correct. That is because I'm still on React 15. And actually here, just look at this warning sign. You can see a valid, in React 15, it says a valid React element or null must be returned. Again, two types that you can return. But now when we actually upgrade to React 16, the shortcut works this time. Wonderful. No pain, no gain. Very cool. It's now happy, does not complain. If I actually inspect the DOM, we can see here that is a nice clean DOM hierarchy. Just an I element, that's all I really care about. Presto changeo, that's the way it range-o. All right, cool. So that is one new thing of React 16 is that you can now return strings from React components. Another thing that you can actually return from React 16 now, which I think many people have been very anxiously awaiting, is arrays. Because we all love arrays, right? You can hold many things, you can hold one thing, you can hold null things, you can hash the length. It's a wonderful data structure. So we have here, up until React 16, you always had to have at least one root element in your React component. That was a constraint, and it was an area where React, the framework, was actually leaking out into your application code. React didn't know how to handle when you had more than one root element, and as a restriction it said, hey, you need to wrap everything for me. And it's not a big deal, it's not huge, it's not really a big bother, but what irks me about that is that it adds all these otherwise unnecessary divs into your DOM hierarchy, where you have an app with a surrounding div, with an h1 with a page, then you have this page which again has another surrounding div. So if you actually look in the DOM, you have an app, which is our React DOM root with a div, an h1 with a div. It's just like, come on. So what we can actually do instead is return an array. And because it is an array, we can remove those. You actually have to add comments into it to make sure that it is a valid array. We can hit save. That auto formatting is prettier, so just ignore that. It's prettier. Let's inspect the DOM again. And we have here a very nice, clean, top-level application. So that's awesome, that's cool. However, writing an array is not so cool. So luckily for us, the React team also agrees. And with React 16, they introduced a new top-level React component called a fragment. So we actually go back to this. So we actually take this div, replace it like this, hit save, and that is now a more clean way of having it be an array that you're returning from your React component. So you have here the div, React 15 here. Let's actually go up here as well. So that's cool. That is a React component. And then in React 16.2.0, that's the full release version number, they introduced a new thing. They introduced a new JSX transform for the Fragment component. So what does that mean is that, you know JSX, where like this actually means something else. This React Fragment JSX transforms mean that you can actually write, so rather than having to always like require React.fragment in your code, which is a laborious process which you don't enjoy, instead you can actually write this, excuse the linting issues, hit save, and that is transformed into React.fragment underneath the hood. The linting is being cut up in the ecosystem, don't worry about that. But that's very cool. That means that you can actually use a fragment wherever you want, not have to worry about requiring in the fragment component when you're actually using it. Just for my own eyes, I'm going to use React.fragment because I can't handle things that are not syntax highlighted correctly, so apologies there. So cool. So we have now a cleaner DOM hierarchy. We're halfway through learning all the new fun features of React 16 that I am, honestly, I'm so anxious to use. That just looks so fun. Another cool thing about React 16, so here we can load new data. Load new data, we see this little loading bar that's just being done by here. We say if it doesn't have data, we're showing this notification component. If it has data, it shows the reload buttons. And up until React 16, when you wanted to render a component, it had to exist in your React component tree. So when you first mount your React application, you choose a root DOM node, and then everything else just kind of spans out from there, as the diagram shown previously. And that's fine. You can get away with that for most of the time, but there are some instances where you actually want to break out of this tree and render things elsewhere. So for example, and that is via this feature called portals, which is kind of cool. So what you can actually do with a portal is say, rather than in this tree, I want you to render it here, actually use this random DOM node and render that component in there. And the really cool thing about that too is that when you are rendering it elsewhere, it maintains the entire application state of your existing instance of your application. So that was a lot of words. Let me show you. So first thing I'm going to do is go into the HTML, and I'm going to make a new element called notifications. I'm going to go up here. We have this existing notification component that you saw before. And I'm going to go const notifications L equals document dot get element by ID notifications. And now there is a new top level API on the React DOM package, React DOM dot create portal. The first argument of this is the element that you want to render. And the second argument is where it should go. So now when I hit save, it reloads, and I hit load new data, it's at the top there. If you actually look at the DOM, you can actually see that this notifications element is now empty. You hit load new data, and there it's being shown in there. That's pretty fast. Let me make it static. Yeah. Right there. No, wrong buttons everywhere. Cool, right there. You add load new data, so that gets updated as well. And you have this new ability to then think about your application in whole new ways. And it's cool for this, like as like a little banner in your application. Modals, because you don't always want a modal to be confined by the Z index of its containing div element. I'm sure you have wrestled with that in the past before and cried, because I sure have. Modals, tooltips, for the same reasons of Z-index being not your friend. There was also a very cool demo I saw online of somebody using the window.open to make a pop-up and actually using the React portal as a way to render the contents of the pop-up via the portal. So you can actually have like a counter in your main page that's counting up via a set interval and actually render that same number in the pop-up, which is just like, then you have an iframe, just like, I don't even know where you stop. So that's very cool. So we have now notifications, and that is the portal API. So that's cool. So that's three things. I'm on to the last one, where up until React 16, there was not really a good story for when an error occurred in your React application. To show this, I'm actually going to roll back the sands of time and do a revert, because that's what Git does. I have this other button that actually introduces an artificial error where like I have an object and I'm trying to access a property off of an object that does not exist. So it throws an error. So this is React 15, load new data with error. We get this error in the console, you see at the bottom there. And we kind of get into this weird broken state where there's no recovery here. You're just kind of like stuck. Like if you had this big application and an error occurred in one branch, that whole branch is just dead. Like you have to refresh the page. There's no way to safely recover from this. And that's a bummer because your users are not going to enjoy using your broken application, nor will they know it's a broken application. So the React team agrees as well, and they introduced this new thing called an error boundary, or it's a new API to a React component called component did catch. And it's a way for you to opt in to deciding how to handle when an error occurs in your React application. So let me actually go back to the future. Let's go back in time. Cool, so you saw how it would happen with React 15. Now when an error occurs in React 16, this is the default behavior. Nothing. By default, when you have an error that occurs in your React 16 application, React unmounts your entire application. And the reason for that is that A, gets your attention, because you're like, where did my application go? And B, React doesn't really know what to do. It has no way to guess how your application should behave when an error occurs. And you can see now they have this nice warning that says, the above error occurred here. Consider adding an error boundary to your tree to customize error handling behavior. And there's a link to learn about it, or you can stay and I'll just keep talking. All right, cool. So this new API is called component did catch. You're given the error object of it. And what you can do here is say doom and dismay. And then I'm going to save it. And remember how before the entire application was gone. So now let's load new data with error. OK, cool. So we still have the title. We have the doom and dismay logging because that is where my mind goes to when errors occur. But the reason why things are still a bit odd is because the behavior of component did catch is the same as a try catch, in the sense that if you try to catch, so also, sorry, let me pause, the error will bubble and the root one will try to handle it. Because this is at the root level, it's going to actually unmount everything inside of there. And the reason for that, I don't know if that was clear, when you have a try catch statement and you have an error that occurs in the catch statement, you have to then catch the error as well. So in that sense, the component did catch is emulating the behavior of try catch. So such that if you have an error in the, I don't know if that makes sense. I'm gonna keep going. So the way to make this better is that you actually have to make a component to wrap where the error may be occurring. So to do that, we're actually going to go up here. I'm going to copy this, go here. I'm going to make this new component called error boundary. I'm going to go down here and yank this, doom and dismay. Go up here again, go that over there, cool. We're going to go here, go this, go return this dot props dot children, just to render that. Then we're going to take this error boundary, and we're actually going to wrap the data cell, which is where that error is occurring, as you can see down here, data cell. So we're going to go here, we're going to go this through that, we'll do this and that and this. I just like to live code just to see how fast I can type while under pressure. Cool. So now we have this, and now what we're going to do is we're going to say load new data with error, and we still have things working now. And the reason for that is because the error is occurring in the data cell. So the error is being thrown there. And then we have right here where it is being caught. It can't propagate up the tree anymore. Whereas before, when we had the error on this component, it was propagated at the component level, which means that all the content of this component couldn't be protected anymore because that error was being handled in that parent component. Does that kind of make sense? Think about it, ask me a question after I'm done, sorry. What's also cool about this is that you can actually customize this behavior too, because this is just a component. You can say has error equals false, does not have an error initially. Do this, we'll do this, set state, has error equals true. And then we're going to do if this state has error, we're going to return a manifestation of my worst dreams, aka doom and dismay. Sorry. All right, cool. That's good. Now when we actually load new data, here's my manifestation. Because each individual block is being captured, I can then control how that behavior should be rendered on the page. And this isn't necessarily what you want to do on your, that is my wife. Thank you, dear. You can still interact with this application though. Because you are handling that error code, you can still have your application in a working state. So if all of a sudden the API starts working again, it goes right back to where it was before. And if it has errors again, it handles it there. You might not necessarily want to actually tell your end user that you have errors in your code, so you could just say return null instead. And it silently just goes away. Cool. So let's just to recap what you just learned right now. In React 16, you have new render return types. You additionally have strings to return. You have fragments. You also have the fragment component with the optional JSX syntax. You have portals, which aren't as cool as the game, but they're pretty cool. And then you also have error boundaries, which might be cooler than the game. So cool. And then fiber. Can't forget fiber. You're not going to see that right now, but in the future, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And that's my talk, React 16. You can see all this code at this URL. It's in my GitHub repo. Again, that's a picture of me, not actually me, because it's just a photo representation. That is my weekly YouTube show called The Console Log, because I obviously like jokes and puns. That's the talk.
Do you have any questions?
I hope it's not about error boundaries, because I really botched that one.
Got it.
Yeah, you talk a little more about
No! I knew this day would come. By this day, I mean today. Do you have in specific what was confusing and poorly explained?
I guess one of the best use cases for error boundaries, two.
If you are going to adopt error boundaries, I think just adopting it at a course level is probably the best way to start. So just by the route is probably like the easiest way to just get things going. As you have more specific error boundaries, then you can handle things a little bit more discreetly. But if you just want to like handle you have multiple nav items, and this nav item might be containing an error, you can make an error boundary that instead of rendering null or rendering doom and dismay, which your user's not going to see, you can just render a very typical 500 error page. Just very what users expect, oh, something's amiss, they don't have to worry about all the nitty-gritty details, but as you want to do more partial rendering of the page, you can then slowly be more finite in your application of that component.
Just a question from you. Company did catch Wolff if child has some error.
You have an error, so this is what I think I was feeling at explaining, is that if I were to turn this data cell, thank you for the question, by the way, if I were to turn this into a non-functional component and add component did catch on here directly, it would be a no-op, because that's what I was trying to make with the try catch expression. This try, where is this? You have a catch, right? This is where you would have a component did catch on this component, which would be like a catch statement. However, if in that component you're also throwing an error, you can't. It has to be a encompassing try catch around that. So it always has to be the parent component above it. So the simple thing to remember is that to catch an error in your React component tree, the component did catch lifecycle method has to exist as the parent to where the error is occurring. Yes, so to properly catch when an error occurs, the component did catch lifecycle method must be present in the parent of where the error is occurring, not in the component itself, but around it. I thought I explained everything so well.
With the new fragment component, let's say you had a fragment with 5 divs inside of it, would you need to give each of those divs a key, or is Fiber smart enough to keep a track of it?
Fiber is smart enough to know that it is a non-dynamically generated array, which I think is why they're calling it a fragment, because it's not really an array, it's a fragment. The reason why you need keys is because that array is dynamic, you're dynamically generating it, so that might change, whereas this is a static, I could do, static is not going to complain about it.
Yeah, thank you again for the presentation. I just want to ask, again, how often do you post videos on YouTube? And
Oh, great question.
if I'm not mistaken, I think you also have this already on your channel.
Look at that little smart person over there. It's weekly, Mondays at 7 a.m. I finish it the Sunday, and then I put it on a scheduled post to be able to now work out in the morning. And you are absolutely correct. I have a rendition of this talk on my YouTube channel as well. So if you do want to hear me say the same words, not in the same order, you're welcome to watch it there as well. And it'll also be on the ReactNYC channel, so you will see my face just slowly take over the internet, as is my ulterior motive.
So let's say our main component, like our pure component, is the page level component. And I work at a company where there's a bunch of people building a bunch of components for a bunch of different pages. I work everywhere. So I'm building a component that goes on the page. I can't wrap my little component in this error handler. I have to have it at that page component level.
You don't, it just has to be a parent of where the error can occur. So the question there was, how should you go about adopting error handling? And that is one methodology, to handle it at the route level. But you can also, like if you're exporting an individual component, you could have a common error boundary component shared that you just have like just nested dolls in some ways, like just like have it be protected from ever showing an error.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh dear. You will hear me later saying this to you. Ha 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 ha.